welcome to PTV World. I'm your host Sana Makul with you in the debate. In today's show, we're going to be talking about an extremely unfortunate and condemnable incident that has occurred earlier today in Peshawar at the mosque in the police lines headquarters. We know, of course, that a number of people have lost their lives as a result of this terrorist incident. We are seeing the numbers being quoted at about 59 now, those who have lost their lives, and more than 170 that have been injured. Of course, this is a series of terrorist incidents that we've seen, particularly in the KP, especially since the aftermath of the end of the ceasefire between TTP and the government. And this is something that has happened post that scenario where the TTP has claimed that they're going to go ahead with an increase in terrorist activities. So far, we don't have an official statement coming in from the central spokesperson of the TTP, but of course, this is what is being pointed towards by a number of reports that are coming in, including that of a member of the TTP Central Shura, Omar Mukarram, who is reported to have said that this is part of a series of suicide blasts that are taking place in terms of the revenge of the killing of the ex-TTP commander Omar Khalid Khurasani. And because of this, the TTP have been going ahead with these particular attacks and have vowed to step up these series of activities. This is not coming in from the central spokesperson, but from a TTP member, according to reports. We also know that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, along with the Chief of Army Staff, went and visited Peshawar, also met with the injured and was given a briefing with regards to the particular incident and the preliminary investigation that has so far been carried out. He was also shown the CCTV footage of the blast, and he also interacted with the injured there. He later, upon his return, also tweeted regarding his visit and termed this a national tragedy, an attack on Pakistan, and said that the sheer scale is unimaginable. And because of that, he has termed this as the topmost priority and is the main concern that Pakistan needs to be dealing with. And of course, this is something that we have been reiterating at the top front, especially in the aftermath of the end of the ceasefire. The National Security Committee meeting was also held in the same lines, and this particular resolve to fight terrorism as the topmost priority was something that was reiterated once again, and a zero tolerance policy was also something that everybody agreed upon. But what it means in terms of how we're going to be dealing with the issue, of course, still remains, especially in the wake of such terrorist incidents that keep on taking place, and many of which have taken place in this month alone. We also know, of course, that the kind of strategies that are required need to be implemented both at the military and the civil front. We also know that this particular issue may not be restricted in the province only. There were, of course, attempts of such incidents taking place in the capital as well, and there is high security alert being announced in the capital and other parts of the country. But what this means in terms of how we're going to be dealing with this threat, what moving forward needs to be something that Pakistan should be prepared for, and how the National Action Plan is going to be implemented and is going to ensure the protection and security of the citizens is, of course, something that remains to be seen. At the same time, we also know that the people who are unfortunately the victims of such blasts have lost people that they loved and cared about, and there are a number of bereaved families today, and our hearts goes out to all of them. And unfortunately, it seems that the burden of being resilient and brave is something that we've had to carry for far too long, and we hope that that's lifted soon. That's what we're going to be focusing on in our segment today, and trying to understand what Pakistan needs to do with regards to these terrorist activities, and how moving forward we need to better protect our citizens. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by Senior Analyst Farooq Patafi, and we've also been joined by Security Analyst Mr. Sarfraz Ahmed Rana. We've also been joined online by Senior Journalist Mushtaq Yusufzai and Brigadier Retired Raashid Wali Janjua, who's Director Research at IPRI. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of the show today. Let me start with you, Mushtaq Saab. When we take a look at the situation today, of course, we're all very, very saddened and perhaps also angry at what is going on in terms of the kind of terrorist incidents that Pakistan and its people have had to deal with. A number of such incidents, of course, have taken place in the past as well, and we have again and again reiterated the fact that we're going to be able to fight them, that we're going to protect our citizens, and that the people's sacrifices are not going to go to waste. But unfortunately, a large number of people have already sacrificed their lives, both civilians and armed personnel. And because of this, when we take a look at the situation today, where Pakistan stands today, how do you think that we're going to match up to the kind of terrorist incidents and the kind of activities that we see spreading around KP, and then of course other parts of the country as well? Perhaps there is a serious reevaluation that is required, but have we done that so far?
Thank you so much. Actually, you mentioned it earlier that after Taliban ended their ceasefire with the government of Pakistan, following failure of the peace talk between the two sides, and after that incident, the militants started attacks. And since the militants are mostly based in the tribal areas and in Afghanistan, so it's quite easy for them to cross the border. There are frequent routes, and then they enter the tribal districts. And now, since the tribal districts are part of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and the police are there, and obviously they target the police quite easily. They can find them everywhere. And now, since the police as well started operation in different places, they arrest them and in encounters they kill them. So the Taliban are very much upset about the police, and they are making allegations that actually the police are preventing us from reaching to Islamabad, Lahore, and other places, and that's why we are targeting them. But today incident is very major incident, and even the police authorities did not expect it, that somebody will enter to their home, because the police line is their home, and there are so many offices and important installations, and there's only one entrance of the police line, and anybody going there is properly body search, and then their name are mentioned in the logbook, and after that they allow them to go inside this police line. But it's a very huge, big question mark on the police performance. Obviously, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa police have a good role, and they suffer losses, but they played a very important role in this war against terrorism. But obviously, you have seen in the past there were some differences between the provincial government at that time, led by Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and PDM, because in July, when the militants came to Swat, they captured some peaks and Mata in Upper Swat, and in some areas in the tribal district. And, the federal government did not respond accordingly. So that was a very unfortunate incident. And now you see the police are under attack everywhere in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So I think it's not alone the KP government to handle. I think there should be a strategy how to handle this situation.
Right, absolutely, and we'll talk more about that. But Brigadier Saab, considering the place and the location of this particular incident, as Mushtaq Saab was pointing out, was perhaps the home of so many security personnel, the police, and of course other very sensitive institutions as well. And it's unfortunate, of course, that such an incident has occurred, but it also points towards perhaps a serious security lapse. The fact that when we take a look at the situation and previous incidents, we understand that the police has been a target, especially in the attacks that have taken place in this particular month in the KP. And we understand that perhaps the areas around where these targets are located is something that is highly sensitive and needs more security and more attention. Why is it that then when we talk about this particular incident, it seems that we're talking in terms of this being not something that was expected or not something that we were prepared enough for? And how is it that we prepare and equip our police forces or our other armed personnel in a proper way, because it seems that they are the front lines and they are the target in such incidents? Brigadier Saab, you'll have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Okay.
First of all, I would like to offer my heartfelt condolences on loss of precious life. Police has been rendering yeoman service in the line of duty, and it's indeed very unfortunate. Now, coming over to your question, it was very much expected, as we see the pattern since last 2 years. So compared to 2021, there has been a 28% rise in terrorist incidents. And especially after Matta incident that Mushtaq Yusufzai mentioned, there were so many other pointers. There has been a continual series of attacks on police stations. Sarband police station is a case in point. Then the quintessential failure was the CTD compound in Bannu. I think that should have been a big wake-up call for all of us, because there 35 hardcore terrorists, they were being guarded by 1 or 2 sentries, and the situation became out of control of CTD elements, and then the SSG was forced to call in, and at a very heavy cost, that CTD compound was liberated. Now, these are all wake-up calls. It's a question of capacity and will. We need to strengthen our counter-terrorism apparatus of police, because police is the counter-terrorism agency. It cannot abdicate its responsibility, and at the federal level, all stops should be pulled to fully resource the provincial counter-terrorism apparatus. At the federal level, however, what is amiss is a coordinating mechanism. NACTA, it's about time we fully resourced it to become a real coordinating agency which can map what's happening, which can collate and collect the intelligence, share the intelligence, and build a whole mosaic, that predictive mosaic that could predict what's going to happen and disseminate the real-time intelligence to all the counterterrorism departments. And these CTD departments of the province, they are essentially the lead agency, and these need to be fully resourced. This argument that police is everywhere and they are vulnerable, it holds ground to a certain level, but then same is the case with the army, which is in newly merged districts of Frontier Corps, and we need to be very clear at this point of time that there is a clear and present danger. A war has been declared, and these whatever little elements are there which are operating with impunity need to be sorted out, and we need to introspect as to what happened in the last 2-3 years when PTI government was in power in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Why did they not strengthen this counter-terrorism department to an extent that they could take the full brunt of these terrorists? And there were some news about bhattas being taken and the terrorist elements of TTP getting those extortion money. Now, these allegations should be seriously investigated. And if those were true, then people should be taken to the task. And we have to assign responsibility where it is due. It is the essential responsibility of both provincial government first and then the federal entities. And federal entities, to their credit, are already there in a big way. Frontier Corps under IGFC is doing a great job there. Army itself is there, and now there are certain redeployments happening in the newly merged districts in response to this threat. But this counter-terrorism department needs to be, fully resourced, and they need to strengthen their standard operating procedures. How come a suicide bomber sneak through a cordon in a very restricted and secure area and cause this mayhem? So these are some of the elements. We need to strengthen our counterterrorism department. We need to strengthen NACTA, and we need to be very clear as to who's going to operate in newly merged districts. If we want police, then police should be properly resourced, not in this manner. Okay.
Right, absolutely, and these are extremely important factors. And Sarfraz, when we take a look at the situation, it seems that all of these factors have been stressed upon again and again. But of course, especially when we take a look at these issues, they are re-emphasized whenever there is such an incident. And in the aftermath of that, we're talking about how such measures need to be taken in. There was already a National Security Committee meeting in place. There's already, of course, an issue with regards to how we're going to approach these organizations, and the threat, of course, has existed for a while now and has ramped up, especially after November. But despite that, such issues still remain. Do you think that there's any working done on any level in terms of strengthening counterterrorism departments or any sort of coordination between various provinces, and especially with the KP, who's been suffering a lot in the aftermath of November, and of course its people are giving countless sacrifices as they did today even. But when we take a look at how the institutions or the departments are, in terms of their capacity responding, it seems that perhaps they need more from us in terms of being able to respond and be well prepared in this regard as well. The sacrifice of all our institutions are there, and we commend that. But how do we make sure that we are best prepared, at least to the best possibility that we have?
Well, thank you for having me in your program. First of all, indeed a sad day, of course. And as you said, that KP has suffered a lot. It's not about one province, of course. The entire country has been suffering from the past many years, of course. And that's not the first tragedy, of course. That is, of course, indeed a tragic day for Pakistan, but also that Pakistan has seen bigger tragedies in the past, and of course, we never know what comes next in the future, of course. First of all, as far as, your question is concerned about that, you say, of course, there is a clear miscoordination between the institutions, of course. And how come a country which is more vulnerable that that can say that okay, that there is not a coordination between different institutions, of course, that Pakistan has been suffering since 70s 80s, and still how we can complain, our institution can complain about the lack of resources or something else. So of course miscoordination, a security lapse is also there, we can see that. And also there is a saying, Chinese saying, Sun Tzu say that know your enemy, whether we know them or not, but they know us very well. And the way they are carry forward their plans, so far they are being so successful in carrying forward their plans. So of course we need to make a national consensus, first of all, of course, and we have to reach to every segment of Pakistani society, from students to universities to diplomats to strategists and to institutions, of course. And we have to, because it is not something that we should be worried about our poor economy, because the peaceful environment is the precondition to a good economy. So of course we need to focus first to eradicate this growing menace. And of course we need to do whatever, like instead of sparing some resources or whatever. So we have to keep this very important thing in mind, of course, ensure coordination and everything.
Right, but the priority has always been there, and we keep reiterating that. Then what's missing?
I don't know whether it's a capacity, it's a will. I won't believe that there is a capacity, that Pakistan does not have the capacity to eradicate the menace of terrorism. Of course, these are just a ragtag forces that Pakistan can easily eradicate easily. I think there is a will, of course. There is something that as I have said, also mentioned about in the previous program, that that Pakistan has been playing behind the good Taliban or bad Taliban. Now the good guys are now turning back towards Pakistan and targeting Pakistan. So of course it's not about the capacity, but of course the political will and certain other very, very important elements which are missing.
Okay, well, there's of course a lot in terms of the kind of will that needs to exist being discussed in the past as well, and we have had important stakeholders sit down and have a consensus on this matter even before when we had the National Action Plan developed, and it seemed that largely this is of course something that the country needs to deal with and is agreed upon. The approach in the past may have been incorrect, but we're on the right track at the moment, but there's still a lot that can be done. Farouk, unfortunately, whenever there is an issue raised with regards to terrorist incidents, there is a mention of the National Action Plan and how it needs to be strictly implemented. And it seems that whenever we talk about this National Action Plan, why is it that it only happens in the aftermath of such an incident, and then it's mentioned that it has to be strictly implemented? Is it not being already strictly implemented regardless of what the situation is, or regardless whether there is an incident or not?
Right, Sana, I'm going to answer this question, but you'll allow me to comment on the previous comments as well. Regarding your question, I think the short answer is when it comes to the military side, of course, it has been implementing or holding up its end of the bargain. The civilian side is weaker. And then we saw, our Pradesh here was actually going back to 70s and 80s. I don't even want to go back to that far, right? I don't go back that far. Just want to go back last year, when everything was really on the right track, and suddenly we reversed everything. But regarding responsibility, TTP's responsibility that you mentioned, let me read you a tweet that is from Salim Masood, a senior journalist who is based in Waziristan, right? He says, member of TTP Central Shura, Umar Mukarram claimed responsibility of Peshawar attack, saying Peshawar police line is the fourth suicide attack in series of operation launched to take revenge, killing of ex-TTP commander Umar Khalid Khurasani, who died, if you remember, in Kabul, in Afghanistan, not in Pakistan, right? And Pakistan had no hand in his murder. Vowed will speed up series of these actions. So TTP's responsibility is now clear. Now let us focus on the, because it was also, Sanju was quoted and it was said that, know your enemy. First enemy of ours is statistics. We always, when you talk about 59 dead, 49 dead, so many injured, we only end up talking about them as numbers. These are human beings who had families attached to them, and they were poorest of the poor in the working class, right? So you'll have to actually understand their pain. I, condole and I mourn their death, because I feel that in part I am also responsible. Repeatedly I have been saying this, that don't go this way, and we did go that way, and in the end this is what is happening. Now let me talk about knowing our enemy. Today, look at how it was done, where it was done. It was a mosque where people, 300, 400 people were offering their prayers. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you are in a mosque and you are offering your prayers, you are thought to be the closest to religion. You are supposed to be the best of Muslims, right? And there a person comes and blows himself up against something which is haram. Killing yourself is haram in Islam, no matter what, right? But he goes and he kills these people. What does it tell you? It tells you that he or the person who was there to kill people did not consider them A, Muslims, B, human beings. Why would that be? Just look at the statement coming from Mullah Habatullah, the head of Afghan Taliban, who actually yesterday and day before yesterday stated that Pakistan's constitution is un-Islamic, Pakistan's judicial system is un-Islamic, right? And where did it come from? He was basically laundering the same thing Ayman al-Zawahiri had written a book on. And in that book, he has actually detailed his critique of Pakistan's judicial and legal system. That's how you actually declare someone kafir. This is how you go for takfir. Again, I don't understand this relationship, that somebody who is in power in Kabul can use such language against us. And suddenly, whenever I talk against them, our people actually suddenly goes mum, or something strange happens, and they all of a sudden start reminding me that no, they are our friend. What kind of friends they are? When they are sponsoring, can you show me any condemnation ever coming from Afghan Taliban of any attack carried out by TTP in Pakistan? If that is not so, why is it that we always keep on thinking about them as friends? Somehow we have allowed radical Islamic extremism as our kryptonite. We have been talking about faith, and we have tried to center faith in our identity so much that now if somebody perverts my faith, I go silent and I allow them to keep on destroying myself. What happened today, if it was not a security failure, right, then what exactly is? This was the heart of our security establishment, civilian security establishment. Absolutely. Somebody goes there and blows himself up. So we have to have a serious conversation. If we cannot, and if we are going to listen to all these obscurantist artists who keep on obscuring everything and who keep on apologizing on behalf of TTP or Taliban, then we are doomed. If we are not going to have that conversation, Sana, then we are doomed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's very important that we do. Mushtaq Sab, considering the situation and especially the fact that when we take a look at this particular issue, there's always the mention of the Afghan Taliban and the role that can be played from Kabul. But unfortunately, we have seen that in the past year or so, and especially in the aftermath of the end of the ceasefire with the TTP, we haven't really seen the kind of facilitation that perhaps we had once hoped for. And so when we take a look at this situation, how is it that we want to be able to factor in their role moving forward also in terms of how we deal with these terrorist organizations and the threat of terrorism within Pakistan, so that perhaps we are able to deal with this on our own if there is no help coming in?
Actually, the situation is far good now, because in the past the militants used to have sanctuaries, different villages were in their control in the tribal district, right from Bajawal to Moman, Khyber, Aurakzai, North Waziristan and South Waziristan. But that's not the case right now, because the Zarbi as operation launched in 2014 in North Waziristan had good success for Pakistan, and these militant groups were just sent across the border in Afghanistan, the TTP, the Afghan Taliban, the Uzbek militants, the Arab fighters. So they don't have any good space in the tribal district right now. But yes, they returned recently, especially after July. They sent their people to Bajawal, Moman, Aurakzai, Khyber, North Waziristan and South Waziristan. And especially after the merger, we didn't focus on the tribal districts, because the other provinces had some commitments with the KP government to give some funds for the development and welfare of the people of tribal district, and they could not fulfill their commitments. And then the KP government didn't have that much resources, and it lacked the capacity to handle the issues in the tribal districts. And now the militants are back, because they have seen the Afghan Taliban. They think that since the Afghan Taliban defeated the foreign troops, they are now in power, and they were fighting alongside the Afghan Taliban. So there is no way the Afghan Taliban can force them or can take up arms against the TTP to go back to Pakistan, because I don't see, because they have close ties with them. And now the Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban, believe that they can defeat the Pakistani forces, the Pakistani government, and they can establish their raid somewhere in the tribal district, because we haven't seen nobody engage them properly in those areas, especially when peace talks were initiated. It encouraged them, and then it gave them enough time to recruit and reorganize inside Pakistan. So I think they have upper hand right now, and now it's up to the Pakistan government how to deal with them. Somebody is saying that we should launch military operation. Yes, if you want to launch military operation, where do you want to launch it? Either Bajawal, Moman, Khyber, Aurakzai, South Waziristan, North Waziristan. Nowhere, because they don't have that much space. They are hiding in the rural areas, they are hiding in urban areas, and Peshawar, they have sympathizer in Lahore, Karachi, everywhere. And they have few people and small groups. They can just carry out attack and just escape. So this, I think, depends the will of the government. And in 2014, if there was a will, it proved that the government and the armed forces were quite, able, and they defeated them. But now it's, I think, the intelligence war. And you see, they don't have that much power. They have limited resources, I must say. They are in trouble in Afghanistan, and that's why they are fighting for their survival.
Right, absolutely. Brigadier Saab, the kind of issues that are being pointed out by Mushtaq Saab, are they in any way different in terms of what we have dealt with in the past, especially with the kind of operations that were mentioned by Mushtaq Saab in Zarb Azbar Adul Fasad? Was there anything markedly different about where we stand today in terms of the way that perhaps these terrorist groups or the people have spread out in the country, in KP or in other parts of the country as well, which is fundamentally different in the way that we have had to deal with this threat in the past?
There is essentially one major difference, and that is that now perhaps the will that was there earlier on and the realization that there is a threat which is still existing, that was somehow reduced in the past 3 to 4 years, and because of that we are paying the price. The methodology remains the same, the approach remains the same. Army has done it before, and as Mushtaq Saab very rightly mentioned, that when the civilian counter-terrorism apparatus fails, it is the military apparatus that takes over. That is not the ideal solution, but that is perhaps the only solution. And we did in the past. We know that how it was in 2012, and from there onwards, how this operation was conducted. In Zarb-e Azb alone, 3,400 hardcore terrorists were killed, and army paid a price. 488 officers and jawans laid down their lives. So this is a correlation, and you can yourself carry out a cost-benefit analysis that at what high cost of self-immolation army eliminated the vestiges of TTP. But once the same elements, because of ambivalence in our policy, because of our love lost for a cause, and because of some policy confusion as to their ideological orientation, the political government failed to create a whole of the society response to this menace, because terrorism is a multi-dimensional phenomenon. It's a hydra-headed, insidious, about which many scholars have written. And you have to take the whole society, and the society has to fight on religious indoctrination level, on epistemic warfare and strategic communication level, on interdiction and starvation of their resource level, on kinetic operations, on policing operations. And policing, treating terrorism as a crime, has to be fully leveraged with the intelligence apparatus of the status and the judicial sources. The judiciary cannot be a bystander, and judiciary cannot, remain, tackling this issue like a normal crime, because then the normal criminal procedures are not geared towards dealing with a insidious phenomena like terrorism. So all in all, there's a requirement of a whole of the society approach, which the political government should have done. What has happened is perhaps the political government...
Brigadier Saab, we keep referring to the issue of the will or the political ideology that may be different, and of course that's a possibility in the future as well. But in terms of how we've decided upon a zero tolerance policy and how we want to prioritize the issue of terrorism, how can there be space for a different political ideology or a different political approach in order to deal with terrorist organizations? How can we have room for that when we're talking about a zero tolerance policy? Doesn't that also apply to such people, and how do we take care of that?
I think it's a given. Zero tolerance policy is our national direction, and nobody can say that there is some kind of tolerance for any kind of a terrorist act. So that's a given.
No, but there is tolerance for terrorist apologists, for example. Why is there not a zero tolerance policy for that?
Yeah, apologists. So those apologists would always be there. The sympathizers would always be there. The closet ideological kinsmen would also be there. But the state has to ensure that those sympathizers do not dilute the policy response of the state. For example,
but hang on, Brigadier Saab, sorry to cut you. You just said that apologists or sympathizers are always going to be there. Consider another country, from India to Israel, America to UK. Had there been anybody, people would have been killed by some terrorist. Had there been any person in any cabinet or any media outlet who would have been sympathizing with the terrorist, do you think they would have survived that, or they would have been shown the door? Why is it that we are asked to make peace with apologists all the time?
I tend to agree on that score with you, that compared to the rest of the world, we are more tolerant of this kind of insidious threat. But I think that time of ambivalence is over. Now, in very stark terms, the reality is in front of everybody. Even the fence sitters have now come around. Just like Peshawar APS attack was a defining moment, I think this police attack should be another watershed moment. And even if those fence sitters were there, they should come around. And we, as I mentioned earlier, need a whole of the society response at this point of time. We have to take our academia, our media, our counterterrorism operators, our judiciary, everybody along. And if there is a unanimity of approach and full resources are leveraged, I think this is not a threat that we cannot surmount.
Right, absolutely, Brigadier Sir, but I think the question still remains that if we have apologists in power and as decision makers, what do we do then, and how is there a zero tolerance policy then, which is still a big question mark. But let's carry forward the discussion. Sarfraz, if we take a look at what has earlier been said, especially in terms of the way that we need to respond, the civil apparatus, as Brigadier Sir was pointing out, has been at the front line, and then he referred to the military taking over once that fails. But currently, given the scenario as to where we stand today, do you think that perhaps need to be our first response right now in terms of how we deal with this? If we're not having negotiations, if we want to go ahead with a zero tolerance policy, then from here onwards, especially in the wake of the possibility of increased terrorist incidents, and especially since the end of the ceasefire, are we or should we move towards any sort of military operation as in the past?
I think, Sana, what is written on the wall clearly, that is that no policy of appeasement can ever satisfy them. Of course, they only understand the power of language, the language of power, of course. And of course, today or tomorrow, of course, our policy establishment and our policy elite eventually are going to make some decision, of course. And of course, there are a couple of things and there are a couple of elements, as I earlier mentioned about knowing your enemy, right? So knowing your enemy means, they know that, politically, Pakistan is politically unstable, Pakistan is economically weakened country, Pakistan is politically, polarized, and also they know that, we will be defended by our apologist right now sitting in Pakistan. So they know us very well. They know our structure and the forces working within Pakistan for them, of course. And the most important thing about the Taliban in Afghanistan, the current government, right? So Taliban, the Farooq was talking about their ideological cousin, of course, and they would never ever hand over, or they would never ever harm those harming Pakistan's interest here by sitting there in Afghanistan, operating from Afghanistan and harming our interest. So eventually, I think, the only language they understand is, of course, the language of power. And as we have said, and we had seen in the past that, but now there is another challenge. In the past we had seen that, the America was there, the NATO forces, ISAF forces were there, and they have been sharing some sensitive intelligence with Pakistan. Now that connection and that channel, that crucial and vital channel is missing. That, the American forces are not sitting to cooperate and to share exchange. And so, of course, there could be a big challenge for Pakistan, of course. But military operation is inevitable, of course, to deal with these forces.
All right. Farooq, moving forward, when we take a look at the situation, there is always, of course, something that is reiterated, the fact that the people are resilient and they're brave, and that the resolve is undeterred. And that may be so, but unfortunately, perhaps this is something that has been a part of a number of people and the way that they have suffered, and it's perhaps a crown that we shouldn't have to wear any longer. When we take a look at this situation, especially with the people who've dealt with this in the past, they of course have questions, they want certain actions and they want results. How is it that we move away from the reiteration of the fact that the resolve remains undeterred, that people are resilient, and move towards protecting them?
Right, Sana. Earlier, Brigadier Sahab was also talking about national will. So immediately it conjured up two, images. It took me back to Darren Asimoglu and Robinson's book, right, The Narrow Corridor, in which they actually talk about will to power, right? There's another will also, that is will to survive. The biggest problem at this moment is that somehow our system is such, our echo chamber is such, that we keep on telling ourselves that Taliban's or TTP's will to power is greater than our will to survive. And that frightens me, right? Earlier, Mushtaq Saab was talking about, and he made a very good point. He said that now you cannot actually identify or locate them territorially, right? When Zarb-e-Azab was taking place, they were limited to a certain part, and we actually took them out and we flushed them out, right? Later we went for Radul Fasad when we carried out IBOs, and that also sort of worked. Now there is something else that has happened, and that is that we in past 1 year allowed people back inside with weapons. We kept on actually placing them in positions where they can actually do a lot of harm. And then we kept on thinking that they have changed without actually putting them through any kind of de-radicalization program. Now when this happens, Sana, there has to be, if you want to actually identify where they are, there's a very simple answer. Go back and just read all the text, all the details. The government of Pakistan must have record who actually brought whom back and where were they left, right? They are their contacts. Go to them and ask them, hold them accountable. Even if they were following orders, there is a clear, trail there. You can actually focus on that and trace everybody that you brought in and remove them from the civilization, from the settled areas, right? But that doesn't seem to be happening. It frightens me that there is a clear picture in front of you. One official is retiring, some politician is pushed out of power, suddenly TTP changes its tune and starts actually attacking people. Then the politician who was pushed out of power, one of his MNAs, dissident MNA, goes on Salim Safi's program and speaks his heart out against his leadership. Next day TTP attacks him. Are you kidding me? Everything is in front of you. There are people who are actually sympathizing with the enemy. And do you want to know the cost of sympathizers, of tolerating sympathizers? Today, the attack took place in a place which was highly guarded. So how did the terrorists go in? I was listening to the defense minister who said that there was somebody, some sympathizer from inside who actually brought him in. And then there were at least 2 tours that he brought and offloaded weapons in the first tour and then went back and then came at the time of namaz and then he exploded himself. So this is the cost of tolerating anybody who is sympathizing with the terrorists, because if they are not with you, they are against you, right? And if you don't understand this, they understand this totally, that if your life is my death, better you die. And this is exactly the cost of everything that we have been tolerating. Our people, suddenly people tell us that, oh, we cannot fight war, we cannot, put up this resistance because there's no money. Question is, who are fighting for past 20 years? Why is it that they were given all the resources, they haven't complained even today, including the police, right? So why are we actually telling everybody that we cannot and we have to abandon this war and we have to surrender 80,000 people who died just because a politician has to be populist?
Right.
This is the question. If you are not going to hold these people accountable, Sana, then again, I'm going to repeat it, and I haven't said it so repeatedly, then we are doomed.
Right, absolutely. And this is something that, of course, needs to be seriously looked at and a concern that we all share. Before we conclude, Mushtaq Saab, what do you hope to see now moving forward in terms of the action that is required? Very quickly, sir.
Actually, I will mention again that it's not the KP government alone that can fight this war, because it has not been able to defeat these powerful groups like the TTP and Islamic State. The Pakistan government and the law enforcement agencies will have to sit with the KP government, the CTD, the police, and empower them and give them more resources. And then,
Right, absolutely. Right. Thank you very much, Mushtaq Saab,
Thank
for
you.
joining us. That was Mushtaq Yusufzai and Sarfraz Ahmed, Rana Saab in the studios with us, and also Brigadier Retired Mr. Raashid Wali Janjua with us in the debate and talking to us at length regarding this very important issue. And of course, as usual, Farooq Patafi in the debate with a reference to, of course, the kind of incidents that we saw today. We're all deeply saddened, and we want to see a change in terms of the way that we are able to protect our people. And so we hope that the kind of concerns that are shared here and the issues and measures that are raised are looked at seriously, and then in the future we're able to deal with this threat and are better prepared and don't let anything slide. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.